welcome to today's Future Focus series. Our guest today is Marty Gerenser. Did I pronounce that correctly? Okay, good. Executive Director, West Michigan Food Processing Association. The pathway that we're focusing on today is agriculture, food, and natural resources. Please note guests of our Zoom webinar will have view-only capabilities and do not have access to video or audio. If you have any questions, please use the chat feature. I will make sure to monitor that and get any answers for you to the questions you may have. And this session is being recorded. So Marty, thank you so much for joining us. I am so glad that you're here. And so, you know, we're focusing on agriculture, food, and natural resources. And what is funny to me is a lot of times when people think of agricultural and food, all of that, we think of farming, and that's kind of where we land. And we don't think of really how this is morphed and the technology that's involved in this particular sector. So I'm excited for you to kind of share some of that with us. Could you kind of share a little bit of what your role is and what you do as being the executive director?
Sure. So the West Michigan Food Processing Association started in 2017. I was actually asked by a number of funders that funded the organization to lead the effort as executive director. So I was chief cook and bottle washer, still am to a large extent, and really created this association out of the need to support the food processing industry, particularly in West Michigan. So food processing is value add. So you take a fresh apple, you take an apple and you make it into applesauce. That's processing. There are many different examples. I worked at Gerber before I started my LLC and ultimately to the association. So I tend to move to fruit and vegetables a lot when I give examples, but meat, dairy, beverages are other pieces to the puzzle. We actually have over 2,400 food and beverage processors here in the state of Michigan that contribute to about 104 billion annual sales per year. So this is a big industry, one of the top 3 in the state of Michigan, and many of our products, grown and value added, are top 10 in the nation. As you know, Gerber is baby food capital of the world and still is. So
Yep.
this is small business all the way to big business.
Wow. And I had no idea the amount of revenue that generates for the state, and knew it was in the top 3, knew that it's up and coming with a lot of the technology that's involved with it. So when we talk food processing here in West Michigan, how does that look as career options for students? What are some of the career options that you might find within food processing? And is there a lot of opportunity in West Michigan for that?
Yes, there is tremendous opportunity in the food industry. Has a severe labor shortage, just like all other industries, particularly the past 2 years. We had to keep producing, growing, and producing food to keep it on our shelf. One thing, maybe the only good thing about COVID is it taught the world that Meijer doesn't grow and produce the food. Meijer sells the food. And when we go to Meijer or Spartan stores and that food is not on the shelf, we've figured out that we need to support our farmers and our food processors and all parts of the supply chain in a stronger way, which has created the opportunity for even more jobs. So related to careers, there are very small businesses that you may know of and you may have frequented at our farmers market or at our storefronts. And so very, very small scale entrepreneurs, restaurants, farmers, food processing, beverage processing, all the way to the CEO of Gerber Products or Kellogg. There's all kinds of careers that you know about are in the food industry. There's needs for engineering. there's needs for marketing, there's needs for financial. These are businesses. These are food manufacturing businesses that need all different aspects of what it would take to run a business. There is minimum wage starting all the way up to running billion-dollar organizations. So these careers are listed with our area high schools, getting more and more prevalent. Certainly at our colleges like Muskegon Community College, Michigan State University, those that in particular are interested in supporting careers in food and agriculture. You can see the list of those careers. You can see how much they pay if that's a driver for you. But you can also see the triple bottom line impact of economic, environmental, and social benefit that a lot of these careers will lead you down the path to.
Yeah, I think, MCC has some programming that's connected with MSU specifically for this to help bring some credentialing to those opportunities here in West Michigan. And what I was interesting when I was talking to the person that kind of oversees the program in that, they were talking about even things like drones that look over some of the growing fields, technology that's involved in like milking cows and things like that. And I'm like, who knew? Who knew that that was that level of, interest in, like you said, if the money is the driving factor, but really, I think maybe, we talk to students about the lifestyle, if you like to be outside or you like to, like you said, make a difference and solve how we can feed the people of the world. And in food processing, I would expect there's also food packaging, the marketing aspect of how you do that, get that cute little Gerber baby face on those, baby food. So lots of different aspects. So Marty, when you were 15, 16, 17, maybe even back in middle school, did you ever see yourself working in this kind of role or even in food processing of itself?
Well, I grew up in Newaygo County on the border of Newaygo and Oceana County, and that's sort of food mecca, food world.
Yep.
So we grow food and we process food. And so food was always an important part of my upbringing. And my dad owned a restaurant, so I was working at the restaurant when I was 15 and 16, working 7-day weeks. We worked very, very hard at that restaurant. And also, the point I would really like to make is that I went to the Newaygo County Vocational School, the Career Tech School. Those are not, you don't just do career tech or college. I did both. I went to the vocational school, which really introduced me to, I was in a business admin, business management curriculum. However, it introduced me to all the different types of careers that surrounded me, whether that be Howmet Industries or whether that be Gerber or whether that be the insurance industry. So the career tech group, as you are doing today, gave me a really good view of the types of jobs that were available, but more importantly, the types of careers, which spurred me on to go for my 4-year degree. Actually, at the time was called computer science, but brought me back to Gerber because they needed computer science majors, which started my pathway to the work I did at Gerber and then eventually to my own LLC, my own business. And I still have my LLC, so I'm teetering between 2 roles, the association executive director and principal of our LLC.
Awesome. And when you say LLC, just for our students out there that may not understand what that is, just to give some explanation to that.
Sure. So when you do decide, or if you decide to set up your own small business to produce a beverage or to do consulting or tax accounting work, you can do that as an independent contractor. But at the point that you start to build a client base, you're encouraged by your attorney, by your accountant, to set up more professionally around, it's called limited liability company, is what LLC is, or you incorporate as an incorporated corporation. And that sets you up with your own tax code. It does add an element of credibility. There are very, very big companies that are still LLCs, and there are very small companies that are INC, incorporated. It really depends on where you want to head as you learn that pathway, and your attorney and your accountant and other business consultants can be advisors on how you set yourself up. But it's really just a company legal structure that gives you
Sure.
a framework to work within. And then you're registered with the state, you're registered with the IRS, and it does add an element of credibility.
I think what's really great about this conversation is, you started out working in a restaurant and in kind of around food. And then, like you mentioned, the Newaygo RESA, or their career tech center up in Newaygo. We have one here in Muskegon, and we have programming in IT, we have programming in graphic art production, we have our environmental sciences, and they do a lot with food and growth of plants as well as animal. And so, like you said, that early exposure to opportunities and just being aware of the opportunities that are available to you. Here at our career tech center, like you said, it's not college, or many of our students here earn college credit while they're here, kind of learning and getting some early credentialing, early exposure to opportunities. So it is a great way to kind of get started. But what I also like is that for people that are in food processing, or working at farmers markets, or doing different things, they might be a small business owner. And so it is really valuable to that entrepreneur spirit and to understand a little bit about business management and marketing, so you can really thrive in that. So it's kind of well-rounded. You have the interest in food processing and agriculture, but you also have the business aspect too. So I think that's really interesting. So what, if I were to ask you what your credentials are, any credentials you have, or any degrees that you may have had, or where you might have went to schooling or to get some extenuating education, what can you share with us about that?
Well, I would have to say I went to Hesperia High School, which was very good high school, in the career counseling at that point, it could still be, at that point was very strong and encouraged us to go to the Career Tech Center, which really opened our eyes to the world. It really helped to
Yeah.
open our eyes to the world. And it wasn't either or, as I say, it wasn't technical or college, it was both. And they both added value. And so I went then for my 4-year degree at Ferris State, which is, I think, Ferris University now, for computer science at the time. That was really popular at the time, especially for women to get into. And I was particularly good at it. So that was what I was encouraged to go into. And Gerber was honest. I interned at Gerber summers, and they were waiting at my doorstep, so to speak. I was going to go work somewhere out of the area, somewhere out of the region, and they were waiting at my doorstep with a nice offer. And I said, well, I will stay here 5 years. And I started to learn about all the intricacies and all the opportunity within the company. And food does get in your blood. We always say we bleed Gerber blue. And so, but even if it doesn't, if you move on to another type of organization, what you've learned in a food organization can benefit you. What you learn from any experience can benefit you. As I was at Gerber and working in the computer part of things, I found I really wanted to learn, as you said, the business side of it. I had an entrepreneurial spirit, and there was a business aspect to the computer side of it, but I really was drawn to marketing and to sales. Those are two different expertises. And so I was able to, through Gerber, take a leave of absence and go back. I went to Aquinas to get my marketing and management master's program, and then went back to Gerber in a marketing role. And we worked in cross-functional business teams. So that means you're part of a business team where all aspects of the operation meet once a week to talk about how we're growing the business. And that really was an open door to see all the different opportunities just within this one company. And those skills were very transferable to my own business, to moving, to Procter and Gamble or to Kellogg or to starting my own kombucha business. It really, a lot of those skills can be very transferable. So you really want to look for what drives you and what part of the business, whether that be economic, environmental, social. Many of our food companies would say they were sustainable before sustainable was cool, and they were social before social was cool. And many of them are working on pretty integrated, pretty strong sustainability plans to reduce greenhouse gases and carbon footprint and a lot of those different pieces of the puzzle. So even if you like sustainability, a food company, a food sector type career could be for you.
Yeah, that's so many good things that you talked about in there. I like how when you mentioned earlier that many businesses, whether it be in food processing, or it could be in healthcare, could be in others, you need people to run the business. And so if you maybe like crunching numbers, you could end up in food processing because you're part of that company. And like you said, you were all cross working together from marketing and different aspects of the company to kind of move that forward. And I know, we talk to students a lot of times about not so much what do you want to do when you graduate. It's more of, what lifestyle do you want to leave, or maybe even what problem you want to solve, because like you were talking sustainability, or how to feed the masses, how to better package a product so you're using less waste, what kind of problem you want to solve. And I think there's great opportunities to be had within food processing for that. Because we have to get better at how we do things to make sure we're leaving less of a footprint.
Sustainable
For the
packaging is very
yeah.
big in the food world right now, and looking at multiple different technologies and ways to get at that. Through the association, we hosted an 11-part webinar series last fall, and about half were new technologies from literally all over the world, from Israel, from Canada. There were some from India. And why did they want to present on our little association's webinar? Is they wanted to get out in front of 2,400 processors in the state. So that's another reason that food, particularly if you want to stay in Michigan, which I hope you do, and I hope you want to stay on the west side, we are considered a food mecca for the nation, both in farming and all different aspects of the supply chain to food processing, ultimately to working at Meijer. Meijer, obviously many food jobs at a Meijer, at a Spartan, and these Lapings, these other stores that are in the area. And they're all in need of good people who want to work. And high tech is really on the horizon and already in place at many of our companies. There are robots in our food plants.
Wow.
and you just move all along the path. Just about any type of job that there's an aspect to it that could be applied to the food industry. And so I know that our food companies work with Michigan Works, West Michigan Works, work with you all, and they share the jobs that they have available at the time, and you can kind of see what's entry all the way to more skilled. There's many that are, like I said, if money's a driver, there's many that start close to six-figure salaries, believe it or not, with the proper training. And there's many that can build to that. Many of us were our case in point. We started at a very entry level, even with a 4-year degree, and you move down the path the way that is most appropriate for your lifestyle.
That is a really good point that you mentioned. Starting at an entry level and working your way up. I think sometimes there might be the misconception of when you come out of college with a 2 or 4-year degree that somehow you will be ahead of the pack. And that is not the case most of the time. Most of the time, that 4-year degree gets you your foot in the door. And then you take that opportunity to work your way up and see what the company has to offer and where maybe eventually you want to land. And sometimes it's very different than when you initially started, the thought that you started. And with technology the way that it is, like you were just saying, new things are being discovered all the time of how things can be done better or more efficiently. So, you never stop learning. For those, you mentioned entry level positions, and we talked to students about stackable credentials. If a student wanted to right out of high school and they were interested in food processing, or they were interested in just the aspect of the business, and maybe how could I get involved initially with just out of high school, or maybe just after a 2-year associate's degree, where might they be able to start?
Well, one example is what we have right at MCC, Muskegon Community College, partnership with MSU, is a 2-year technical training degree in agriculture, offered by IAT, which is Institute of Ag and Technology. Out of a 2-year program, you're skilled for a frontline supervisor role already in a plant. Now, you might not start there. You might start as one of the workers, but very quickly, particularly if you're interested, you're set up to move up the scale. Typically, these food companies will then move you on to a 4-year degree if you're interested. Often that's paid for. So that's one example. Right out of high school, there were many, and are many, who are working in internships, apprenticeships, sometimes full-time jobs, and the 4-year degree with a lot of these companies is paid for. You got to realize we have Kellogg in Battle Creek, we have Gerber in Fremont, we have Peebler, we have a lot of names. Leprino Foods is in Ottawa County, Request Foods. A lot of the names that you see in your grocery store are not very far from your doorstep where that product is produced. And supporting our local growers into local processors, out to local stores, to local consumers is really on trend to limit, unfortunately, we're in a war. So you're seeing the not so good side of being very global and commingled. And we're trying to get more self-reliant on fuel as well as food, as well as many other aspects. And so it's a really good time to be in Michigan. Like I said, the food industry battles with auto often around who's top in the state. We just don't have the marketing machine to tell everybody about it.
Well,
It's getting better.
Yeah, I think
that's
so.
one
And
of the roles of the association is to put us on the map again around the workhorse that we have here in the state. I mean, if you look at premium berries, just one example, blueberries, apples, cherries, cucumbers, strawberries, we're top 10 in the nation. And second behind California in diversity. We have over 300 commodities we produce here. That's a lot of product to process, and that's a lot of product to get out the door, and a lot of sales to be made. And like I said, if money is a driver, just look at the numbers from the ag industry, and you'll see that these are very big businesses known around the world here in Michigan, and it's the best kept secret. So I'm constantly trying to wave the flag.
No, and I think that's really great. And that's why I'm glad that you're here, because I think, we need students to be aware of the opportunities that are within this sector, and to know about how they can take advantage. And if they have, an inkling for business or IT, transportation, distribution, processing, there, like you said, the doors are open. Interestingly enough, I was traveling, I think it was up by Kalkaska, and you'll be able to probably tell me if I'm correct. And I saw all these huge military trucks, and they were traveling down the road, and they had just loads of potatoes. I had no idea that Michigan was quite the grower of potatoes, and a lot of our Lay's potato chips and Made Right potato chips all come from the growers up that way. Is that correct?
That's correct. We do have some here in West Michigan as well. And our soil is set up with Lake Michigan and our sand. Our soil is set up for along the lakeshore here where we are to be very fertile for, as you know, asparagus, cherries, apples, cucumbers, Swanson pickle in Muskegon County and Urbana.
Yep.
Number one in the nation as a pickle grower, supplier. It's the best kept secret. Farmers tend not to tell their story. They tend to be very modest and just go right back to work the next year. And food processors tell their story, like Kellogg tells their story through marketing, but what they grew from nothing, around grain, around soybeans. I can send you the list of where all of our products land in number one, number two, number 10, in not only in the state, but in the nation. It's absolutely amazing.
That is incredible, incredible. So, you were talking about skills a little bit. And so what are some of the skills that you think would be important for high school students to know going into this field that would be a benefit to them? What are the kind of skills that would be helpful in food processing?
Well, ultimately, if you're looking at a particular job, a particular career, there are skills you hone in on or go to school for. But it's pretty basic. It's work ethic and commitment. I will say, food work it's not an easy industry, and maybe there are no easy industries. But you work hard in the food world. You, as you see, food, people got to eat. People got to eat 3 squares a day, or at least a couple a day. And when we have a worldwide pandemic or a worldwide war, you hear more about that and how things are moving into not a disaster mode, but into a very high pressure mode to get food out the door to feed people. So it's really work ethic, commitment, passion, and still maintaining that work-life balance around what really drives you and what really supports the industry. So those are the basics. I think those would be the basics for almost any company. There are companies that are not quite as front and center with all of these catastrophes going on as food has been, and the disruptions in the supply chain, but everyone is affected when all of this happens. So it takes then another level of commitment when you weather the storms. So, and then as you move into what you really know you want to do, as I moved from computer science into marketing, and ultimately into strategic partnerships, which is another level, you really dial in on what are the skills needed and what can I contribute based on my strengths, based on my interests, and then get your training and get your experience based on that.
I think that's an important point you brought up, because we talk to students a lot of times too of, in 7th grade, they start doing their educational development plan, and they revisit that every year. And part of that is taking that personality test, finding out where their strengths, their interests and abilities lie. Because really, if we're interested in our abilities align with what we want to do, it's not going to feel like work. It's actually going to feel like we're contributing, we're solving problems, we're helping people. And those are what really drive us to want to be the best that we can be. Um, sure, we have to make money and pay the bills and things like that, but we also want to know that we made a difference in whatever it is that we're doing. So I appreciate you mentioning interest and abilities. So students out there, if you're doing those educational development plans, they really are important and they really do help drive you to what will be good fits for you. And that's how
Yeah.
we can help you,
I
your
would
counselors
just
can
add
help you.
that, I would just add that back in the
Yeah.
day, we did the same thing. We took those educational assessments and I always saw very early on, sales and strategy always rated pretty highly. And I always didn't, always thought, I'm not going to be a salesman. And I could never, I would just, my point is, listen to those because
Yeah.
they're telling you something, particularly if you take 3 or 4 different tests, they all kind of come out a little bit differently. But if there's one common denominator, I didn't listen to that as much until I was about 10 years in. And then it started making sense to me. And maybe it will be
Yeah.
that too. But it's not lost time. It's just those assessments really, really do speak. They speak pretty loudly to what your skills and your interests could be.
Oh, I appreciate that, Marty. So as we wrap up, and I appreciate, all the wonderful things that you shared today. If there was a last little nugget of wisdom, for a middle school or high school student listening today that you wish you would have known, had you, on your journey and to where you're at today, what would that nugget be that you'd like to share?
Well, I probably just shared the career assessments are worth taking and worth reviewing, and then reviewing again as you take it when you get older. You'll take these all through college, and even when you're out in the workforce, you take them again, and they can change. But for the most part, listen to that and look at what can you do to build that skill or build that particular interest. Looking back, we had a lot of opportunity offered to us, even in a small rural school. There's nothing about a rural school that is going to limit you more than a school in an urban setting. It's really about leveraging what you've got there and not limiting yourself based on where you live or where you're growing up at. Because now, particularly with the internet, from your phone, you can find out a lot of information. We didn't quite have that, but we did have what we had an ability to see the world through a bigger lens was offered to us. And I would just, continue to take advantage of that and really think about what that means.
I think that's great advice, to look for those opportunities to, once you've identified some of those interests or ability areas, is explore and see what connects with you. So Marty, I'm going to have you stay on as I sign off for everybody else. Thank you for joining us today for our Future Focus series, and make sure to join us again next week. Thank you.